You got to take a look at the Canadian dollar, but how much are currency traders paying attention to the Liberal minority that will go back to Parliament? Well, let's take a look. Right now, at 76.39, we are down a whole tick against the greenback. What is going on? Adam Buttons, the chief currency analyst at ForexLive. He joins us now with all the insight. Adam, great to see you.
Hi, Greg.
So we got the result finally. You and I have been talking for weeks about what may happen, what may not happen. We have a Liberal minority. Are the currency traders globally paying that much attention? Or are they saying, oh, that guy again?
I mean, it's sad, right? Or it's almost shocking how little the market has cared. I think in Canada, you get caught up in the minutia between the parties. But globally, Liberals, Conservatives, it's more or less the same thing. And we're really seeing that in the currency market. There was almost no movement yesterday, hardly any movement today. But as Canadians, we should feel blessed by it. I mean, we have the rest of the world that's diverging wildly and moving on political headlines. And, you know, for Canada, boring's good. And I guess that's what this is.
We all will turn our attention back to, I should say, the central banks again. Usually when we discuss currency, central banks, boom, we had an election. But by next week again, we'll be talking about the Bank of Canada.
Right. And we had some data today, and it is something for the Bank of Canada to think about. The retail sales numbers were soft from Canada, but there was some odd numbers in there. You know, we had new vehicle sales strong, used vehicle sales very weak, and some other quirks that made it seem like, well, maybe it wasn't quite as strong as it was, and the month before was very strong, or it wasn't weak, but the month before was strong, and then the Business Outlook survey was very strong, especially on capacity pressures. That means wages, more or less, and that's something the Bank of Canada can worry about.
Exactly, but at a certain point, the Bank of Canada keeps sort of saying it's cool. Don't worry about it. We're going to sit over here on the sidelines, and the market believes that they're going to sit on the sidelines for a while.
Yeah, we're down to about 13% chance of a cut this year, and then into next year there isn't a lot priced in as well. And I think if you look at the domestic economy, it's strong and it's solid, and there are some wage pressures. And if we were to get some resolution on the trade war, better global growth, it's not unthinkable to believe that the next move might be a hike, maybe a year from now or farther out from that. So that's something to probably start thinking about. And with the minority government, you probably have a bit more spending going out there. That's stimulative as well.
Okay, let's turn our attention to Brexit. Show the audience the British pound. We got a bunch of headlines streaming right now. They're busy in the British Parliament. Bit of a win, bit of a setback for Boris Johnson on the Brexit deal.
I mean, you have to be a constitutional scholar in the UK to follow along. But what's happened is he won the first Brexit vote, and we saw a spike up in the pound just on the far right side of that chart. And then even farther, it drops back down because Parliament blocked an accelerated timetable. That means Boris Johnson's promise of Brexit or bust by October 31st isn't going to happen. He's going to need an extension. Now he's pushing for sort of a 10-day extension, and he's open to that, and it seems Labour's open to that. So I think in the big picture, this deal is going to get done. We've been saying it for months that Brexit is going to happen, that there will not be a no-deal Brexit, and that's still the case, but he's kind of had a setback in the short term, and I think it's a buying opportunity for the pound. Now,
of course, the pound will bounce around on this news, and you say it's a buying opportunity. How much of, you say, the currency market probably telling us there's going to be a deal? Is there much more substantial upside for the pound? Yeah,
you know, that's such an interesting question right now. You're starting to see some people and some analysts tap the brakes and say, well, we might only have 3 or 4 more cents. But if you look at positioning in the pound, it's extremely negative, and there's structural negative there as well. But if you look at some of the valuations in the UK, it's extremely depressed. I mean, if you take a longer term look at the pound, it is way down from where it's been historically. And it's still a fairly dynamic economy, and it may come out of this with a government that wants to spend some money and some upside. There's going to be continued uncertainty, but I still think there's a lot more to the upside than a lot of people are saying. We can see 7, 8, 10 cents to the upside in a very short order, similarly to what we've seen in the last couple weeks.
All right, so we've had a chance to have a little bit of breather when it comes to constantly talking about China and the United States. China and the United States. A few days we turned our attention to our own election, but of course we still have this trade skirmish and a bit of weakness lately in the U.S. buck. Is that a bit of optimism out there that China and the U.S. can at least get a little mini deal going?
It is. It's absolutely some optimism, and just about global growth, about a bit more stimulus. The Fed is probably going to lower rates again at the end of the month. So there is a lot of mild optimism brewing. One thing people aren't talking about is Thursday is a major speech coming from Vice President Mike Pence on China. And this is very likely to be something hawkish that can stir up the wasp's nest once again and maybe start to send things in the wrong direction. So keep an eye on that.
Oh, so that'll be a big one. I mean, and clearly the speech would be meant to send a pretty clear signal
There are
to China about how they feel in the administration.
some real hawks within that administration. I don't get the sense that Trump is really one of them, but there are some people in that administration that want to poison the well for a generation. And I think we might get that kind of signal, and it depends how China takes it from there.
I'll have to watch that carefully. Thanks for bringing it to our attention, Adam.
Thanks, Greg.
Adam Buttons, the chief currency analyst at ForexLive.